Welcome to No Password Required, a monthly conversation that gives you an up-close and personal look at the world of cybersecurity.
Hello and welcome to No Password Required, a podcast dedicated to exploring the minds and personalities that make up the field of cybersecurity. I'm your host, Ernie, and with me as always is Jack Clabby and Pablo Torres. Before we go any further, let's talk about who we have on the show with us today. On the podcast today, we're going to chat with Phillip Tarrant, the SOC Technical Manager at Compuquip Cybersecurity. Phillip is a natural problem solver who thrives on building things both with and without a keyboard, and he's passionate about welcoming people into the field of cybersecurity. Speaking of welcoming people, Jack, Pablo, how are you?
Doing awesome.
Doing all right.
Doing excellent this morning. Ernie, I got to tell you, so I wake up this morning, I go downstairs, and my 9-year-old son says to me, Dad, there was a segment on NPR. He listens to NPR while he's eating his breakfast, which tells you a little bit about how my household operates these days. He said there was a segment on NPR about cybersecurity. I was like, I don't want to be scooped by my 9-year-old on cybersecurity. This is my jam. So I stopped and we listened to it. So NPR got an exclusive with a representative of the White House, and apparently they're working on an executive order that's going to impact how federal government contractors deal with cybersecurity. It has two parts. One part is going to be software protection. So it's going to be, if you're developing software products, you have to have them segmented from the internet during the period of development. So a bunch of other sort of pieces of this about how software is developed safely. And the second is going to be about how investigations are going to occur of breach events. And it's sort of unclear whether this will be limited to federal government contractors or not, just based on the NPR segment. But the way it was pitched was fascinating. It's going to be like the NTSB, which is the organization that investigates airline crashes and incidents. And the idea is that closing this gap between the FBI on the one hand, who investigates cybersecurity incidents for prosecution, and portions of Homeland Security that do the protective work or the intelligence work to stop them from happening in the first place. It's going to be an investigative body that then is going to report out, here are the sources and methods that were used by the bad guys, and now we're going to throw it out there for everyone to use. So there was a lot in that, kind of jam-packed in, and I was a little surprised that NPR was the outlet that the White House used to sort of throw this out there, but I don't know. A lot to think about from this.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's interesting, especially, so as you probably know, everybody came, last year, the Department of Defense came out with regulations and compliance requirements under their cybersecurity maturity model compliance, or something along those lines. CMMC is the abbreviation, and that was strictly for DoD contractors that had to have a certain level of cybersecurity compliance as they went forward. And there was rumor that they were going to roll that out or be adopted across the federal, the executive branch of the government. So it looks like this may be tied to that. And then the other part that I think is really cool and interesting is that NTSB type of role in this, in that it's an investigative arm to determine the scope, how it happened, what happened, who's involved, and then offering some recommendations for moving out and mitigating and taking the steps. I think that's really interesting. What'll be neat will be to see if that does turn out in a thing, and then how does that play out in reality. I did like the example that we have the NTSB for major transportation accidents, which happen, maybe on a bad year, big, like once or twice a year, but yet we don't have something for cyber incidents, which seems to happen at least on a daily basis, if not multiple times a day. And so having something like this, I think it's a good idea to bring this, the whole, I'll call it the whole, I'm going to use cliche terms, the whole of government approach to this is how we can get better at doing this. And I think it also provides a good model that that people can understand how about this? That an average, it's a good comparison that non-cyber folks can understand. If you say the NTSB, they kind of get a night. Oh yeah, these are people that come and investigate, plane crashes. Yeah, well, who is this? The national, the NCSB or whatever they're going to be called? They're going to investigate what happened at the cyber incident. Where I think you're going to start to get the pushback, though, is when people start saying they're going to use the results and findings of those investigations for your world in the legal side of somebody's held responsible.
I'm not sure my clients, after a breach event, they have enough reporting obligations. It's pretty amazing if you think about the wheel that applies to a private company that has to report. I mean, they have regulators now, they have AGs in some states, they have contract counterparties, vendors, customers. There's any number of reporting obligations. Additional folks poking around in the system's just going to add cost to this. And really what it does, I think, in the contracting standpoint is it might improve security to some degree, but it's going to squeeze out a lot of the sort of mom and pop players. So we saw this, I think, with FedRAMP, with the cloud computing standards that have the intent there to some degree, or a secondary intent was to create a standard that the industry was going to adopt outside of government contracting. I don't think it's really happened. Maybe it's too early to tell, or maybe there are parallel ones that are developing. But I love the point of comparing it to the NTSB. Yes, we all know what it is from movies probably, but in real life, it just doesn't have enough touches on the ball. It's like, NASA sends a couple of rockets up to Mars every decade. It's like, calling the Coast Guard. Hey, we have this idea for the Coast Guard. It's going to be like NASA for rivers and onshore patrols, right? You're like, well, not really. It's an entirely different thing that is going to have a lot more responsibilities. And I don't know. I mean, Pablo, you're going to be having to spend some time with this new agency if they're going to be looking post-incident. But, what do you think about talking to a Fed who I guess doesn't have the ability to prosecute a client or a customer, but has the ability to ask for things from them?
Referencing back, if I can circle back to the article, it's nobody's job to tell us what happened, and that's specifically referenced in there. How am I going to feel personally as a consultant who is currently working on a government project? I'm going to consciously manifest a Fed that can both speak business and tech, because it's difficult to get both. And it's normally more challenging to acquire the latter than the former. And I say that because of some interesting insights that the article proposes. And it says that realistically, when it comes to our national security agency, they aren't monitoring what's happening internally. What's happening is that we have foreign state actors, advanced persistent threats, that are going and getting creative with how they penetrate an organization within the United States. They're not attacking from abroad. They're going to go ahead and rent a space on the cloud via AWS, Amazon Web Services, and they're going to go ahead and execute code from an internal U.S. location to go and breach an internal U.S. target. And that's not going to get picked up on the NSA's radar because their focus and their scope is facing out, not inward. And then you go ahead and introduce the role of the FBI. The FBI isn't proactively looking for these type of attacks or these type of malicious actors. They're responding after the fact, and they're doing their due diligence to find out where it is that it came from. But are they disseminating the facts after with an after-action report? The debriefs themselves don't really articulate what it is that's happened within the cyber environment itself. And then, further to be said, it really puts a hindrance on our ability to adapt and pivot to provide a strong, secure infrastructure as a country, as a whole. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. And for our listeners, the NTSB is the National Transportation Safety Board, and they're inspecting plane wreckages, and they recover black boxes to see if the crash requires a systematic fix. A cyber NTSB would potentially paw through the code and the data logs to discover the root cause that permitted a successful cyber attack. There's a lot to be learned.
And it's funny, it's like, I guess you could put an NTSB for anything. You think about it, right? If you're a manufacturing company, if you have a problem with a robot arm that breaks your manufacturing line, that could potentially be serviceable by other companies that run similar robots, right? So it doesn't have to be, it is something that they're sort of picking up. I guess the idea of cyber is that SolarWinds was so devastating. And that, I think, was the hack that's mentioned as the source for this. But SolarWinds was also, at least from the public reporting, incredibly sophisticated, persistent, long-term, potentially foreign funded, like just extraordinary. And the idea that we're going to set up some rules that are applicable to all federal government contractors to stop that is a little silly. It doesn't match one-to-one, because whatever you mandate, if Russian operatives want to get in and they have money and they have 9 months, I mean, they're going to get in. Having maybe the idea of the NTSB is at least let's put some, let's get the story out if it's a story that is repeatable across other organizations. But my guess is that in 9 out of 10 applications in the real world, it's going to be a unique story to that company that allowed it to be hacked, and not something that's necessarily shareable.
Yeah, and that's where I think you're scratching along those same lines. That in the SolarWinds, I'm not even sure there was a vulnerability. The vulnerability that was exploited wasn't a code problem, a vulnerability that they came in. It was one of those, the phishing attacks. So there wasn't. If we look at it from what this, are we gonna default to? It's going to turn out that the response to all this is Copilot error, right? Is that what it's going to end up being for all of these? And which okay, is that so? Now we're further beating the drum that yes, we know that people are going to be involved and they're going to make mistakes, and how do you mitigate that? But I think we already know that. That said, I do think there's, especially in the SolarWinds is the example, and there's going to be tomes and tomes of data and stories written about this one out into the future. We may never actually see the actual happening. That'll lead us to figure out kind of what happened. But then there's also side of it with the, what's going to be the cut line? When does this organization come parachute in, and to do it? Does Oldmar make the cut? Does the Oldmar water treatment plant make the cut of something that's happening? Does the Escambia County ransomware, does that make the cut? I think it's interesting. There's more to be learned about it. I do know that the people that are, I like to think of it, that people that have their hands on the rudder have a pretty steady hand anyway. I'd like to think again, but
no, that's right. It's a sober group. We're thinking of this, and I think it comes from the right place. You just wonder about latching on costs to something that's already costly. You have to think about what the benefit's going to be to that.
Yeah, and that same type of you mentioned the mom and pop vice, the big, if you're an aviation manufacturer, you've got a lot of safety things you're already figuring. There's not a lot. Or if how about this? And if your airplane falls into if you're the quote mom and pop aviation folks, your airplane's classified as experimental, which makes you fall outside a lot of those regulations. So where's the cut line of experimental in the people working with the government? Because you're going to get there's how many thousands of 2 and 3 person shops are working for our government contractors. There's a lot of them that are whether they're suppliers, they're providing limited services. I mean, and now all of a sudden they've got to become compliant. They're coming from a good place. I think the government is, because we got to get somewhere. But in typical, it's going to be the devil's in the details in the implementation, and that's not going to be. It's going to put a hurting on a lot of people, especially a lot of people that are coming out of a COVID slowdown. Add a little. Oh, I thought it was going to get better in 21. Yeah, right. You hold my beer.
I think that's another thing we've seen too. For a year and a bit ago, when everyone went into work from home mode, the security conversation was about remote work and remote login and not printing things through your personal email. But now we have people returning back to work who are disciplined for remote work, but they forget about the stuff that, okay, all my code is really good, but SolarWinds can still get in if there are human agents trying to get in. Well, all the remote work security in the world doesn't matter if now you're back in the office and people forget to, do the Control L before they leave for the day, or if they forget about tailgaters who go through a secure checkpoint. So I think it's probably worth it for everybody to remind their teams about operational security and physical access security, as opposed to simply, continuing to worry about remote access and continuing to worry about all the stuff we were for the last 14 months.
It's going to be an interesting speed bump, but I don't think it's going to be the brick wall that we need. And I say that because it comes from top down. We need to engage the primary stakeholders that are part of these organizations, these entities, these conglomerates. We have to get them engaged to know that, hey, the bottom line isn't always about making a profitable margin. It's more or less creating a model that's going to be sustainable long term, that's going to allow you to develop a product that's going to be useful to the consumer, to where the consumer can get good use but also safety. It doesn't always have to be convenience, and I think tweaking that and sharing that lesson is really going to help the implementation and integration of this whole initiative. Because at the current moment, we can give someone a rule book, but does that mean that person's going to follow that rule book? I don't think everyone colors them within the lines.
I think you made an interesting point there, Pablo, when you were talking about in the past, there's been this constant, rush to get things to market. And I think in this case, when it's I got to get something out there. And what we're seeing now is you're seeing these supply chain vulnerability and supply chain risk assessments, and a lot of people that were rushing to get things out. Not that they were cutting corners, but we got to get something out, and so we're gonna shortcut here and there and here and there. But now that's probably going to come home to roost. And I think we had a boom time where it was okay to put things out quick, fast, and get it good enough. But now we're finding that you gotta you actually have to. If I use the Silicon Valley model of things, where it's now you actually got to produce a product. We were happy, back in the early 2000s, people were investing in vaporware like it was going out of style. And we saw that all kind of implode and fall apart. Now it's the same type of thing I think we're seeing with our supply chains. It's okay. Yeah, it needs to be a fully rounded out product. You're gonna have to start seeing that, whether it's software, hardware, et cetera, et cetera. It's not gonna be the, hey, just get out. It's cool, man. That's fast. It's all right. I got a major investor, man. Do they say man? Do people say
I think
man?
they still say man.
Yeah, man.
That's the worry about something that comes out by executive order, kind of no matter how thoughtful it is,
Yeah.
is on the day it comes out, it's already 6 months too late or out of date. And so you don't want to be you can set expectations, but it's tough to set standards. It's like, if you're developing software that's going to be used as part of a federal government contract, you have to do things A, B, and C while you're developing it to protect it from bad guys seeing it or getting in there. That's a lot, right? And that may end up not being the best way to do it. And so you worry, the more specific it gets as to how you're supposed to approach it, the more it's going to need to be watched and updated, the more it's going to put sort of handcuffs on folks who are developing software to think it collaboratively and creatively. And three, then it becomes, like, once you set a standard and you start updating it, it becomes about the standard and not necessarily about what you were putting out there to protect in the first place.
I think that's great. That's exactly right. You put your head down and they're swimming, and the next thing you know, they look up and they're way away from shore where they started or where they wanted to be. That's right. That's exactly correct.
Big time. Gentlemen, very eloquently said to the both of you, and I don't think they could have said it any better. An executive order alone isn't going to do this, but you know what will at least get the ball rolling? Us facilitating here on this podcast. No password required.
That's right. And with that said, we're going to take a quick break. And when we return, we're going to talk to Phillip about his journey from breaking his first computer at 12 years old to becoming a SOC Technical Manager and cybersecurity expert. Stay tuned.
Have an idea for a guest or topic? Send an email to info@nopasswordpodcast.com.
All right, welcome back. Our guest is Phillip Tarrant, the SOC Technical Manager at Compuquip. a family-owned cybersecurity solutions provider whose mission is to educate businesses of any size or industry to manage cyber risks. Welcome to No Password Required.
Thank you.
So, tell us a little bit about your path to cybersecurity. How'd you get here?
Oh, it is a long, twisted tale. So I guess probably I got into computers when I was around 10 to 11, somewhere in there. I broke my first computer within 4 hours of having it. I deleted DOS. I had this book that said DOS for Dummies, which obviously I qualified, and looked and was like, oh, well, sure, we can delete things. What's this auto-exec bat thing? Oh, we don't need that. Let's get rid of that. HiMem.sys? Not needed. So I deleted all that. Had to track down some people to help me install DOS. That took about 4 or 5 days. From there, I kind of, played around, and I remember, when my mom got a 386 with the turbo button, and from there we got a 486 and bumped up, and we had Windows 3.1, and I was on IRC a lot when I was like 14, 15, somewhere in there. And from there, I went and started at a help desk place in town. It was a call center, and we were doing Hughes satellite. Back then it was dial-up, and then it would return down to the satellite. Then I got put on the beta project for us to do the two-way communication. And that's when I started to get kind of into the security world, I guess, a little bit. I was scanning the network, being a bad person, and I found an HP LaserJet that was shared from Virginia, and I'm in Augusta. So I immediately called the NOC and let them know that their HP LaserJet is on the network, and they literally said, we're unhackable, we're the NOC. So I installed the printer and started printing out War and Peace. I got yelled at because I burned through like 5 reams of paper. From there, I was let go, not because of that incident, but because they pulled the contract. And they offered me to be an AOL technical support. I declined that offer. And then I couldn't find a job to save my life. Everyone was like, you really just have this help desk experience. You don't have any certifications. So I went and got my A+, came back, and then they said, oh, you're overqualified. We don't think you're going to stay around. So I actually became an EMT for a while. Half my family's really in the medical sector. So I was like, you know what? I can do this. I destroyed my back over the course of a couple days. It was just really hard things happening, and off duty I had to pull something out of a car, and at that point I ripped everything in my lower back, and it took a long time before that got healed. And while I was laying on the bed doing nothing for months at a time, a friend of mine came to me and he was like, hey, my boss, he does computer stuff, and he will hire you straight out the gate. Just go talk to him. So I did that, and from there, I was probably in my 20s, 24 or so, and I worked at a private school, kind of like a block time situation where I went out there and I did all the IT stuff. And I tell you, if you ever want to really get good at security, just go manage a school. Those kids find everything. I mean, I had Windows XP, the messaging service, right? They were sending messages to each other through the computer, and I'm like, okay, so I disabled that, and then someone found how to do a blue screen. Someone installed Sub 7. I don't know how they even got that in, and they installed that, which is like a remote access Trojan of Doom there. And so anyway, after about 8 years there, I got really bored. I kind of just automated everything. I got really into Linux and a lot of programming, and I told my boss, I was like, dude, I'm playing Minecraft every day. And there's only so much Minecraft you can play. So he was...
That's actually good to hear. That's good to hear that there's only
there is.
so much.
I haven't found it yet, but I'm getting close.
I was going to say, because my kids will be they'll be good on that at least. Okay, so there is an end.
Supposedly.
Right, I got it.
So I got my college degree because I was one of those people that didn't go to college. I thought it was a waste of time. So I got a college degree, and from there I worked at the National Wild Turkey Federation, which is not a government job. You would think with the name that it was, and I was very disappointed to find out it's a nonprofit, which means they could not pay me near what I was worth. But it was really kind of fun. The guy, my director, Greg, he was awesome. He when I first came into the interview, he shows me the server room, and he's like, as soon as we walk in, he's like, "I'm embarrassed by this. Don't look behind the rack." So I go and look, and there's like a spaghetti monster of doom, and so we were outsourcing like everything. We were paying over like $2,000 in hosting fees to this company who owned all the code for our software, for our website stuff. And I was like, we can do this, dude. Like we've got the people. So we built like a web team and put things on the internet. And the minute you do that, of course, nefarious people start knocking at the door. I got back into security.
Well, Phillip, hang on. First principles. What does the National Wild Turkey Federation do? What's its
I'm
mission?
guessing it's not to do with the famous fabulous drink.
No,
of
but they
wild
are a partner. And if you go to the conventions, a lot of times they have a stand which has free samples. I wasn't allowed to partake, but yeah. So they started with only I think it was like 1970s. There were around 3,000 wild turkeys left in the United States, and they were on the endangered species list. And so they activated the charters. They started getting a lot of people to donate. A lot of conservationists are hunters, so they started, asking hunters for membership fees, which went toward foundations to help the birds. The other half of the organization is land conservation and management. The government actually, they work with the U.S. Forestry Service a lot to make habitat and stuff for the turkeys, which happens to be habitat for everyone else. So really great mission. Turkeys now are at all-time high numbers. Brought them back from the extinction list. It's one of the best success stories you can get into. It's really cool. So I see the spaghetti monster back there, and we went in there, we rewired everything, and writing a lot of code and getting stuff online. And the minute we started doing that, we're getting a lot of just WordPress stuff, people looking for that kind of thing. Also, they were, we got a whole bunch of Russian activity for a while. It was great. Because when this happened, the whole Russian collusion thing came in, and my boss, I was like, okay, we got to geo-block a couple countries here. We don't do business with North Korea. We don't do business with Russia. We're a U.S.-only company. Do you mind if I go ahead and geo-block it? And he was like, the Russians are coming? And I was like, hold on. This isn't Red Dawn, okay? But these are the real Russians.
That's awesome.
And he was like, oh. Well, sure, let's go ahead and block them. So we blocked everybody, and of course, then everyone just went and bought boxes on Amazon and started doing the same activity. So it's not like it really did much, but so got into the cyber part kind of there, and doing a lot of code development and stuff. And I had the opportunity to work at ICE. One of the kids that I helped teach through advanced computers, he was like hooked by the bug. It's bad. Like he started programming. He stayed with me after school every day for an hour for me to teach him like everything I knew about Linux and everything else. And we had, taught him a lot. And then he goes on to be cybersecurity at the Intercontinental Exchange. And then later on, I called and was like, hey, I'm really kind of bored where I'm at. I need something to challenge me a little more. And he was like, it's funny, we have an opening. So I went in. That was one of the most grueling interviews I've ever had. That was 7 interviews. There were like phone calls. You go in, and then there's the lightning round of interviews where you come in. There's this big giant wall of whiteboards, and they're like, okay, design this network with these things. Go. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, all right, what site of notation is that? And I looked at him after about 4 hours of this, and I was like, I got to use my phone. I'm sorry. I can't do subnetting in my head today. And he looks at me and he says, when I took my CCNA, I wasn't allowed to use a calculator. And just stared at me, and I was like, wow. Well, I'm not getting hired. Okay. And he's like, but if you need your phone, you go ahead and you use your phone. And I was like, oh, okay. So I whip out the phone and I use it, and I got my site annotations. And after I got hired, About a week and a half later, we're all eating pizza, doing like a "Hey, Phil got hired" thing, and team building thing. And I was telling everyone about the grueling interview this man put me through, who was my manager, right? Everyone's dying laughing, him especially. And I'm like, that wasn't funny, dude. Like literally, I was about to move 3.5 hours for this job. I had everything lined up, and you go and pull that on me. He goes, "No, it's funny because I failed the test." I was like, "Oh, that's awesome."
That's awesome.
So,
That's awesome.
from there, I was at ICE for a good while. Learned a lot, kind of cut my teeth in that SOC, and from there, moved on, and now I'm at Compuquip. Now that I burned like 30 hours of talking, so sorry for that.
No, it's like, listen, you've been all
So
over the place. You've done a lot of interesting things. Jack, what do you got, man?
Yeah, what do you do now? Just give us a snapshot of what a typical day is like, or a
Oh
typical
boy, it's
engagement for you now.
great timing actually. We just had a couple fire drills. So right now, we run a managed SOC. So a lot of customers of ours, we run their SIEM, we monitor things, we handle and triage a lot of the alerts. Right now, we've got over 20 customers that we do that for. So a lot of my day starts with like metric look at, just basically look at some dashboards, kind of find out what kind of bad stuff's going on. Is there any emerging threat or anything? Good example is actually last night. One of our clients is a very tuned environment. They only have around 3 to 4 alerts a day, and then suddenly at 7 o'clock, we have 80. So and then it's like administrator impersonations and lateral movement all over the network, and I'm like, this is bad. This is like there's a service account who's logging in as an admin, and all of a sudden he's on 55 assets. And we are all going to run. We're doing all this stuff. We've called the poor guy who's on call, and he's like, "I was eating dinner, but I guess I'll go back to the office." And we're like, doing all the triage and everything we can, and like no one knows what's going on. And I'm like, I think we might need to start changing some passwords here. We need to start locking this down a little bit, and especially because you guys say that you have nothing going on. He's like, no, nothing is going on. We have a change window later, but not today. And I'm like, did someone jump the gun? And he's like, no. And then 3 hours later, we finally got the guy who like knows everything. That one, every organization has that one guy who knows like everything, right? He's like a robot.
That's Jack.
Yeah.
That's Jack. He knows everything.
So he gets on the phone. He's like, oh, we changed all the VDI environment, like everything, at 7 o'clock today. And I'm like, oh, well, that explains everything we're seeing. And he's like, yeah, one of the admins is updating a thing, so he's running a script that might log in as him. And I'm like, oh, well, next time could you maybe give us an email or something beforehand? But I mean, at the same time, I don't get upset at those. They're great practice. I would rather it be, something that is totally plausible and explainable versus an actual attack. So they're good practice runs. So we do things like that.
You'd rather be wrong twice, right?
Exactly.
Than miss something because you're afraid to pull the switch.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
It's funny. We have a newer guy on the team, and he was the one who I sent a message, and I was like, I need you to go ahead and call the person on call, because he was the one on call that night anyway. And so afterwards, he was like, did I do the wrong thing? I'm like, no, you never did the wrong thing. Like when you see a customer who has 2 to 3 alerts a day, and all of a sudden they go to 80, you absolutely did right. I would rather go through 100 false drills than miss one. So
Yeah, that's when you have a pizza party for that employee.
I bought him lunch.
You did the right thing.
Yeah, exactly. Buy him lunch. Just say good job. Everything's great.
Yeah. So along those lines, have you ever encountered something? I mean, I think that's an excellent. That's the right practice, right? You want. You ever run into a place where you do that and somebody gets. And the corporate culture is that, oh, you screwed up, we're going to jump all over you, and you get it wrong, because that seems to me that's the worst of everything. You want your security team to phone you in the middle of the night, regardless of what it is. Not be afraid to phone.
I can honestly say I've not had that happen, which is
Yeah.
good. And most people, they understand the way we frame everything is we're a partnership. We are their SIEM and everything, and we're kind of the experts. But they have their security team too, right? So, and they know their environment way better than we will. Eventually, over time, yes, we get to where we really learn it and we know everything about it. We have lots of documentation on normal things and whatnot. But I've yet to have someone, how dare you call me? I was in the middle.
Who are you, sir, to call
You
me?
wounded me deeply. So no, luckily I've not had any of that.
What is it? So if you spend a lot of time in a SOC or somewhere where you can get a call from someone in a SOC, what do you do to relax? What do you do outside of the office?
I'm moving to Tennessee. I have a large amount of acreage there. There is fiber optic to my house. It's like literally right outside. It's 1 gig fiber. But when I want to truly relax, I just unplug.
Nice.
Right. I turn off I don't turn off the computer, but I turn off my monitors, walk away, and just go spend time with my family. Sometimes my dad and I will go shooting. Sometimes we'll go play disc golf. I'm really big into frisbee golf. As much as we hate using that term, that's probably the best way to describe it. So just do things away from the machine. My eyes get burned in enough with these screens, so it's good to get out and do stuff.
We heard that you like to build things too, not just on computer side, but also sort of larger pieces of, grills and whatnot. What are some projects that you've worked on that are kind of cool?
So, with that, when I was working at that school, during the summer, I would go there for a couple hours, and then on the way back, there was this metal shop, and they used to redo construction equipment, big earth movers and backhoes and stuff like that. And a friend of mine worked there. He's also a computer guy, and he was like, "You need to come out here because it's really cool stuff. Like, we're working on a howitzer today." I'm sorry. How did we go from a bulldozer to a howitzer? And he's like, "I have my whole arm. It's in this howitzer." And I was like, "You're kidding me." And he says, "No, we got it from Fort Gordon. They gave it to us. Our job is to demilitarize it. We have to take the firing pin out. We have to pull the barrel full of lead. We have to do all these things and weld all the things shut so that nothing moves. We're going to spray paint it, OD green, and then they're going to put it in this town called Grovetown, right in one of their veteran memorial spots." And I was like, "So you're working on a howitzer?" And he's like, "And that's just the tip of the iceberg. You should come out." So I come out, and mainly it was a lot of working on things that are not howitzers. But then these guys started finding these Porsches, these like 1960s Porsches, the 356 Porsche, and they would come out there with Swiss cheese because they're full of holes from all the rust, and we would restore them, cut out the bottom of them and rebuild them and paint them, and these cars, they go and win a couple car shows, and the guys would sell them for $1 million, and they only have about $50,000 in them. So I got to work on those. Got to work on the first Porsche in the United States to have an electric sunroof. The sunroof was shipped in the car in the trunk. The dealership had to put it in because that way Porsche themselves was not liable if it were to leak during the boat ride over.
Wow.
I got to learn how to paint cars. I got to learn how to weld and all these different things. That was really fun. It was great and satisfying to work with your hands, because if I look at someone and say, I've rebuilt the TCP/IP stack of a Windows server, they have no idea what I did. But if I hand them a hunk of metal or a grill or something, I'm like, I made that. Unga bunga, I made that, and
Wow.
anyone.
Or you come screeching into the parking lot.
Right. Well, I don't have a Porsche, but yeah, I mean,
I built that.
it's like, yeah, I mean, now it's funny. Like I repainted I had a Miata, and I had, I souped it up and all that stuff. And one of the guys who owned the Porsches, they bought the wrong paint color, so they just wrote it off. And they were like, "Well, wrong paint color," and I was like, "I need a paint job."
Wow.
Right. So the guy was like, "Well, you need to learn how to paint cars. Might as well learn on yours." So 3 weeks later, I have a $10,000 paint job because it had real metal silver flake in it. Like, there were little bits of silver in this paint, and it was gorgeous. And the guy came, and he's like, "Is that my paint?" I was like, "No, absolutely not. Not your paint at all." I was like, "That's a whole
Not even
different color."
close.
And he
Not
was
even
like, "That's
close.
not a different color."
That's right.
So I parked my Miata next to his Porsche, and they were completely different colors. But that's how much the color was off. It was not off a whole lot from a distance, but if you got it right next to the other one, you could tell.
It's the silver flakes in there that make it radar
Right, well-
reflective. It's like stealth technology.
Little pieces of carbon fiber too would be great.
That's
And I
right.
put stickers on it, which automatically gave it, more horsepower and it's faster.
Conventional wisdom is if someone asks you what kind of Porsche you should get, the answer is a Miata and an F-150.
Yes.
That's the
Yes.
correct answer because it just
Yes,
is, it's
I
a lot
actually-
more fun to have those two
Yeah.
cars.
Yeah, I just I had a Miata a long time ago, and I got rid of it when I had a child because it's only got 2 seats, and I can't, not gonna put myself in the trunk. So then later on, I got another Miata. I got it in 2019. My daughter's like 7 at the time, and so she loved the car. It was fun, and I got rid of it this year. Traded it into I got a truck, and a buddy of mine was like, "Why?"
Well, you're moving to Tennessee.
Well,
man. You're
exactly.
moving to
He was like,
Tennessee.
but still, he was like, "Why? Why would you get rid of your favorite car?" And I was like, I'm at the stage in my life where I need to move something a lot more than I need to go 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. I I don't need to go fast anymore. I just need to be able to go pick up something like more than one bag of groceries, because that's about all you can fit in a Miata. So if I need to go somewhere and pick something up, I have a truck now.
Don't worry. Eventually, you'll end up looking like me, and you'll be driving around in a minivan. It just happens.
Oh.
I used to be cool.
I think the minivan it's typically the objective correct answer for almost every circumstance. It's the right car for everyone to buy. But it's a good example of, because that's true and not every single one of us is driving a minivan, it's an example for how people don't always take the right advice. If that were the case, we'd all be in minivans.
That's true.
So, Phil, what would be if we had to give out the one bit of advice? What would to our extensive listener base, what would be the bit of advice that you would offer to someone who wants to get into the field of cyber?
Don't be afraid to break something. Try. I've learned far more by breaking things and having to fix it than I've ever reading books or talking to people. That's definitely right up there as far as those are things that are really important. Is the determination. I saw it a lot of times when I was a teacher. You talk to a kid and you're like, hey, they're like, hey, I want to do this, and I'm like, well, what have you tried? And they're like, oh, I haven't tried anything. I just raised my hand to ask you the question. And I was like, well, try something first. You might learn something. Just try it. And if you fail, it's okay. That's your first attempt in learning.
Phillip, how has it been now that you're a SOC manager now, and you have folks who call you if things need to be escalated, but you've had other roles in your career? How is it to be a manager? What prepared you for that? What advice would you give to folks who are looking to become management in this space?
Take note of what your manager does. Learn from your previous people. I've had really great managers, and I've had a few really bad managers. It's good to look back at all of those and remember where you came from. I don't really, I am a manager, yes, but I don't consider myself that. I imagine myself as one of the guys or gals. We're all part of the group. We're all here for the same objective. I kind of manage everyone as though they are a peer, because I don't feel that, while I may have gotten some more knowledge about one thing, they might know something that I don't. Everyone has different experiences and gets further in life different ways, and everyone has a different point of view. So, I typically try to listen and watch, and just kind of, like I said, everyone's kind of a peer. And look and learn and remember what great managers did, and look at what bad managers did, and go, okay, I'm going to try not to do that.
So imagine you've seen a lot of things come across your desk in the days. What are some of either the least or sort of maybe most impressive phishing emails that you've come across?
So we had one at ICE that was amazing. There were probably at the time, there were like 35, 40 people in the SOC. at that one physical location that we had multiple SOCs. But this one comes through, and it was crafted so well because it was written like a normal reply chain is. Like they went back and did all the indentions and everything all the way down, and basically had this whole fake conversation with like the head of HR about bringing this unique marketing opportunity to where we could all, because we were people of ICE, we could go to this special marketplace to get discounts on things. And it was so good that half the SOC was arguing over the fact that it was legit. and Jerry, who is the CISO over there, he's a genius, by the way. He truly is. That man is a robot. I don't know how he does what he does, but he's awesome. He comes in from lunch, and he's like, so what do we think about this phishing email? It's pretty good. And I was like, so are you team fish or are you team legit? And he was like, why don't we just call the HR person?
Yes.
And everyone's like, well, now you're taking the fun out of it. I mean, that's, that was probably one of the best ones.
That's awesome.
One of the worst ones I've seen. I mean, I gotta hand it to him for creativity. It wasn't. I don't even know if it qualifies as a fish. Somebody sent a $1 trillion mark from the Bank of Kenya to an office, and then asked if they could set up a wire transfer to withdraw their money. They were hoping that we were going to deposit this. By the way, it looks like it was made out of tinfoil and saran wrap, right? This $1 trillion denotation from the bank of Kenya, and we're gonna immediately create an account for them. And then, how do we transfer this money out? It's like, wait a minute now, come on, seriously.
Go big or go home. I like
Right?
it.
I guess maybe. I mean, like I said, it's just. I mean, the gumption is well worth it. Shoot your shot, right?
That's exactly. That's it.
Exactly.
What just to wrap things up in terms of what you do? We've talked about the SOC. We've talked a little bit about the MSSP sides, but can you just kind of summarize for us what managed security services are? Like, what is that as a service? What is that as a career? What is managed security services, and why should somebody who's maybe not involved in this field care about it?
So it's one of those situations where we offer a wide array of services. We offer pen testing, we offer vulnerability management, we offer the SOC side, we do all of those things. If you're in cyber and you want to get into it, I'll explain why you probably want to. And I say this in every interview I get, because people ask me, like, why should I? What are some of the cool things about your company? We manage over 20 different environments. Completely different environments. You will never get the exposure to different environments than you will working for an MSSP. We've seen pretty much everything. I've seen people who, when they onboarded, they had 2,000 accounts that never expire on passwords. Ooh. And I've had some that were so hardened you had to jump through like 5 different jump boxes just to get into something, and everything in between. So it's really cool to look at it from that perspective. As far as like why you would want to hire this kind of thing, I go back to Greg Warner, who was my director at the National Networking Federation. He was really big. He was like, let's get a pen test going. I want to do a pen test, and I was like, dude, I can do this. Yeah. And he looks at me and he said one of the most genius things. He was like, but you don't know what you don't know. And I was like, okay. And he's like, let's hire someone who, like, they do this for a living. That's all they think about, and they probably will do a better job. And he was right.
Do you have a feeling now on turkeys? I mean, do you still eat turkeys having worked there?
I do. It's funny. I actually have pet chickens. I have about 30 chickens right now. I can't have any roosters until I move to Tennessee because we already know what happens with dogs, right?
Yeah.
They don't like dogs barking. They definitely won't like roosters and whatnot. But I'm okay with it because they're not my chickens. They're not my turkeys. I'm okay with that. It's totally fine because they're not mine.
And it's conservation and it's management as well, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Philip. After a short break, we're going to return with Ernie's lifestyle polygraph. Stay with us.
You are listening to the No Password Required podcast. We cover cybersecurity and a lot of other stuff.
All right, welcome back. Philip, are you ready for the lifestyle polygraph?
I am ready for the lifestyle polygraph.
Yes, and for those that don't know what the lifestyle polygraph is, it's a series of questions, 5 questions, designed to probe the inner depths and inner workings of your mind, sir, so that we can get a better understanding of who you are. And some of these may or may not be related to cybersecurity. So here we go. First one, we've already determined that you are an animal lover. You enjoy animals. You have chickens, no roosters, but you also have dogs. So, as an animal lover, which you have both here, which would make a better cybersecurity professional? A chicken or a dog? A chicken or a dog?
Man, that's difficult. I'm not going to lie, that's hard. Chickens are very curious creatures. They're kind of like cats with wings. They go around, they look at everything. They're really kind of cautious at first, but then they like slowly come into something. Dogs, on the other hand, I've got a couple of really smart dogs who are just geniuses. But at the end of the day, I'm going to have to go with the chicken.
The chicken?
And I say that because I've seen like videos of a chicken take out a hawk who was protecting its young. So, I mean, and dogs are ferocious when they want to be, don't get me wrong, but I mean, you go from Siberian wolf to Chihuahua. Nothing against Chihuahuas per se, other than I think that, their skin's a little too tight. That's why the eyes are bulging. But it's got to go with the chicken.
No, chickens also, the things that come out of a chicken's body you can eat.
Yes.
That's not the case for a dog.
Not mine, anyway.
We have a great dog. We welcomed a pandemic dog, and she is a great guard dog, and she'll bark when there's someone or something outside the house. The problem is she also barks when there's no one outside the house. So you can't tell the distinction between the two things. So I don't know if she were a cybersecurity professional. I think she'd be crying too much wolf, even under the scenarios we discussed.
Yeah, mine have a
lot
problem.
of too many false positives.
Yeah, mine have a problem with sketchy leaves. If a leaf falls just right, it's a thing. There's one who calls the other 4. All right, so he's like, he goes outside and he'll stop and like look up at the door and he's like, "Bah-rah-rah," and then the rest of them are like, oh, we're going to, okay, let's go, and they all go nuts. So yeah, I get it.
I guess where I think we're going with this is I think you need to just swap out the dogs for the chickens and let the chickens roam around inside your house.
If they were litter trained, I would totally do that. My wife actually looked into getting diapers. I'm not doing that. There's a line, and that's the line right there for me.
I would agree.
There's a business idea. There's a business idea out there, Ernie.
There is. Somebody's got to come up with that, and I imagine we can probably run the gamut of large to small birds. Quail diapers,
right?
Yeah,
ostrich.
I mean, down here we got the. Yeah, I mean, something like that. You could probably use a full-size adult diaper as your prototype. I mean, I don't even think you have to do too much. Now, that said, I don't know how you would go about getting those on said creatures, because I imagine they'd be pretty.
You have to train the
feisty.
dogs. You got to train the dogs to put the diapers on the chicken.
That's right.
I just don't think I'm going to be able to go up to an emu and say, "Okay, lie down."
All right.
Trust me.
That's a tough segue. What is more satisfying to work with, a keyboard or a blowtorch?
Hoo-hoo. It really depends on the mood. If I'm programming,
and I mean blowtorch, not necessarily on person.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
No mafia
things
here.
going.
No,
I mean, I will say if like I have a keyboard that's got blue switches, and I listen to a lot of techno as most of programmers probably do, and when you're banging out code, it feels really satisfying. But at the same time, there is nothing better than hitting a blowtorch on a piece of metal and watching it just turn into water and like fall down. I got a funny story actually. A friend of mine, we were working on cutting out this gigantic piece of metal. It was like a 4x8 sheet, And he was just cutting away, and I was somewhere else in the shop. I wasn't too far away, and he was like, "Hey, Phil, am I on fire?" And I looked down, and his shoelaces had caught fire. He didn't even stop. He just kept going. So I just grabbed a squirt bottle and just squirted out his shoes. I was like, "Yep, but you're good now." And he's like, "Okay, great." And he just kept going. It was hilarious because he just did not care. He just kept going. I was like, at some point, man. I mean, Georgia heat, blowtorches. It's no. I would have called it right there. I'd be like, I'm done.
That's one of those. You usually don't hear that type of that discussion on the SOC floor.
Right.
Hey, Phil, am I on fire? All right, here we go. Number three. If you were hired as the CISO for the Empire, as in the one that strikes back, which cybersecurity policies would you implement first? Bear in mind that I'd say the original Star Wars trilogy, episodes 4, 5, and 6, have and to a certain extent, the Rogue One prequel have a big cybersecurity theme running through it. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, I think probably data loss protection, because the rebels, they always knew what was going on. They had the blueprints to the Death Star. They knew about the exhaust ports, which, I mean, when a guy's using space wizardry to change the trajectory of a photon torpedo straight down an exhaust port, the exhaust port blows out. So why is it being sucked in? I don't get it. But anyway, they always seem to know what's going on. Like they've got so many spies and insiders. It's just crazy.
It's governing at a distance, but it's also, they rely on forced labor and slave labor, and that's just never a way to do it. It's an extreme example of why happy employees are less likely to be insider threats.
That's right.
You got to listen to those workplace surveys.
Exactly. That is a very good point.
You know, that's that. And I wonder about that. I guarantee you they didn't have that. They certainly didn't have a.
What kind of pension plan did they have?
That's right.
Well, that's right. What's the Empire's with their ombudsman's thing? You know, hey, listen, I got a couple of grievances I'd like to talk to you about. You know, apparently Lord Vader came in the other day. I was hurt by his words, and then he also killed the
right.
Admiral,
He just
in front of me.
force choked him right there. You know.
Yeah.
And
for something that I felt was not as
and
important.
that always
not as
goes
critical.
back to don't talk about religion. See, that's what happened.
Yep, that's exactly correct. Yeah, that's right. Because, you know, if that happens, you get somebody they're going to, you know, their lack of faith, it would be destroyed, right?
It's not a safe place to make mistakes.
No.
Yeah.
No, like we talked about before. Yeah, you wouldn't want that. Because if you want to get into the field of cybersecurity, you want a place that, hey, you know, challenge yourself. Go ahead. You can't be afraid to break things. Not in the Empire, baby.
Well, in this case, you're talking about breaking something the size of a moon.
Yes, but that's no moon. That's no moon. Here we go. Number 4. You've described negotiation as one of your key strengths. Have you ever seen a negotiation in a movie and said they're doing that all wrong?
Well, normally because they negotiate. You know, a lot of times those movies are like, you know, hey, if you give me like a good example is, hey, you give me a Bitcoin, I promise I'll give you 3. Or I have all your data. If you give me $500,000, then I guarantee that I'll give this back. You know, my family's got a lot of military history. My grandfather taught me something when I was really young. This is going to sound horrible at first, but let me explain the whole thing. So he was like, if you ever get taken hostage, you need to just become dead weight and fall. And I was like, okay, why? I mean, don't want to fight back? He's like, no. If you become dead weight, the guy's already got one hand taken up by the gun. So he can't really hold you when you've got one hand on you. You're going to be dead weight. You're going to fall to the ground. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, and you understand this, right? I was like, yeah. He goes, good, because I'll shoot you to get to him. And I just sat there and was like, I'm sorry, what? And he's like, look, if he will shoot you in front of me, he'll definitely do it 6 miles down the road. So taking that same lesson and applying it to to negotiations in the cyber, right? When you're talking about that kind of stuff, a lot of times, if you negotiate, you're showing weakness. There have been times, don't get me wrong, there's been many a times where, you do pay the ransomware people, and honor amongst thieves or whatever, they'll actually give you the keys back, and you can decrypt your data, and you move on with life. But they're going to come back. All you're doing is encouraging it. You're simply feeding the bears. So with that, on the security side, definitely. Now, as far as like negotiations with vendors and stuff, be nice to your vendors. I've seen people who are just flat out horrible with a vendor, who, like, I'm not kidding you, made one vendor cry and they quit that day. It was a thing. It was horrible. And luckily peer pressure won on that one. We got him to where he's a lot better. But at the end of the day, they're just trying to give you a product. Can they make it cheaper? Probably. But at the same time, you got to think about it from your perspective. So it's a give and take thing. Try to do the compliment sandwich. Say something nice, say something mean, and then follow it up with something nice. And that way, at least you're ending on a good note.
And on a good note, number 5. Here it is. I think we may know the answer for this, but we're going to throw it out there anyway. Better way to recharge your batteries: a museum, nature, or a nature museum?
They have a nature museum at the Turkey Federation, by the way.
Bam. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
They even have a whole helicopter in the museum. You can sit in the helicopter.
What?
I'm going to spend so much time on the internet looking at this now. I'm like, my whole evening.
They have animatronics.
So cool.
They have everything there. They have the oldest turkey call by the Native Americans. They have everything there. I got to work on some of the animatronics. It's great. We got to change out
an animatronic turkey.
No,
That's
they
awesome.
do have They have people. They actually have. They have.
It's like the Hall of Presidents.
Yes,
except
it is.
for turkey
it really
aficionados.
is. There's even like a rap song when you walk into one of the spots. If you stand there, they do this like "Get Your Call On" rap. It's hilarious. The first time you hear it, the second time you hear it, you just want to die. But
what rhymes with turkey? Blurkey. Yorkie.
Yorkie. Yes, you have to go from turkeys to dogs. Again, we're at that famous fowl or canine. Which is better?
I heard a rumor that Ben Franklin wanted the sort of symbol of America not to be the eagle, but to be the
That's
turkey.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're indigenous only to the U.S. There's 6 different species of turkeys, 5 of which are wild. There's one that is the domesticated turkey, who is solid white. Wild turkeys, they can be flat out mean. They have giant spurs on the back of them. You can have, and they like imprint on people, and they like you. Kind of, if you raise them, they'll be friends with you, and they'll attack anyone who comes near you. I'm telling you, there's a whole thing you can.
Dude,
do.
I'm getting a turkey. I'm thinking this is a whole thing.
I'll go half on that, Ernie. We'll split.
And think
that.
of the eggs.
I think we should get one for the show.
Yeah.
And they lay eggs.
Yeah.
Really. I don't know. I guess I knew that, right? They're birds. I mean, that's part of the high school or elementary school science course. Birds lay eggs. Never had a turkey egg. I don't know. Never had them. Whole life.
Well, an ostrich egg is equivalent to like 13 normal eggs.
I think we're really covering a lot of ground here. We've this is really turning out to be the I don't know if we can call it the poultry episode, the fowl episode, or what. But we've really I think we've got a lot to go. And I don't know about you, Jack, but I've really I'm falling almost squarely in the Ben Franklin camp on this one. And let's nominate the turkey for the national bird. If not the national bird, at least the sponsor and mascot for the podcast, because from what I can gather, the turkey, smart, angry, and loyal. It's just like our show. Bam.
Perfect.
All right. So I think we're at a point where we're going to have to transition, because we got a really great segment coming up next. Phillip, thank you very much for joining us. If our listeners would like to connect with you, how can they do that?
They can go to Compuquip.com. We have to contact us there. They could also, I think emails are on there as well.
Oh, great. And so anything up, what's next for you? Anything big coming up in your life, or aside from the move on the professional side, that you want to share with everybody?
No, I like I said, with us being able to touch so many environments and stuff, one of my biggest problems I've always had is I get bored. But when you've got 20 plus environments and more on the way, I don't think I'm going to get bored for a good while. So I think I'm just going to stay where I'm at for a good while, be happy. I got a great group of people who I work for and also who work for me.
All right. So coming up next, we've got Pablo Torres will, for the first time, consider 2 candidates for the same role in our fictitious cybersecurity organization. You know them and love them. It's Scooby-Doo and Velma, 2 members of the Mystery Incorporated gang. Which one of these crime-fighting sleuths will be a right fit for our organization? Stick around and find out.
There's a place for everyone in the world of cybersecurity, and Pablo Torres plans to prove it. Welcome to Positively Cyber.
Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Pablo Torres.
Welcome to Positively Cyber. I'm your host, Pablo Torres. When assembling a first-rate cybersecurity organization that is ready at a moment's notice to defend against any threat, we quite frequently come across some very arduous deliberation when choosing the best candidate for a role. Up to now, this has been the commonality, in which we will now dissect to the root. How do we alleviate this current friction within our onboarding process? And how can we establish a consistent baseline that will exemplify the excellence our firm embodies? What is the way? If there's one thing we have learned so far in the process of building our organization, it is that every candidate has their own unique set of skills that enables them to succeed in their respective positions. No 2 candidates are exactly alike, and that is one reason why the role of human resources is so critically crucial as we continue to organically mature our impenetrable team. In today's episode, we will be juxtaposing 2 great candidates for the role of head executive of human resources. One of our candidates can always sniff out the right answer to the most seemingly insurmountable obstacles, while the other candidate subsequently has the brains and the critical thinking skills necessary to methodically conquer even the peskiest of conundrums. That is, unless she loses her glasses. Both candidates share the ability to work efficiently on a team and can confidently step up to the plate when needed. This is an undeniable fact. Nevertheless, each has their own respective strengths and weaknesses that will influence our decision in choosing the best fit for the role, for whom we will lean into with entrusted care and their steadfast stewardship. So let us ask ourselves a worthwhile question. How do we know? And is the saying, if you know the right thing to know? It is important for us to note that the commitment to exceed and execute is built on top of persistence and discipline. It is discipline that determines one's actions, as well as one's overall degree of integrity and intelligence, which all coincidentally coincides intuitively with one's own volition to embody good. As our organization continues to expand, we have to keep in mind the demands and needs that we have all committed to maintain. For this reason, we are looking towards the right bit to help us continue to thrive. We are looking for the underdog, the leader that will pinpoint the intangibles and source the right woman or man for the job. To say the very least, this is a tough bind, and we find ourselves at an impasse, which has us in quite the squeeze. So without further ado, Velma and Scooby-Doo, care to show us what you can do? Velma Dinkley, Jinkies, by far the smartest member of Mystery Inc., a group of 4 young people and their talking Great Dane who solve what they believe to be supernatural cases. Velma is usually the one who unravels the mystery first, thanks to her wide-ranging body of knowledge and superior intellect. Her biggest weakness is that her glasses are forever falling off, and she can barely see without them. Still, her intellectual firepower helps the team much, much more than her nearsightedness hurts it. She is brilliant, modest, and comfortable in her own skin. Velma is all about getting results and not at all about taking credit. Velma is the unsung hero of Mystery Inc. Notwithstanding, does this equate to her being the best fit for the role? We shall come to find out. Scooby. Our heroes do not always come in the most desired or expected shapes, sizes, or breeds. Nevertheless, Heart and overall conviction are truly desirable characteristics of a refined, well-poised, humble leader to drive our organization in the right direction. When looking into the attributes of Scooby-Doo, he offers what we can call the intrinsic value added. Scooby is inherently loyal, and his courage does often force him to take a more heroic stand. Scooby-Doo, a lot like his partner in crime, Shaggy, are several degrees of the same entity. They share several personality traits, mostly being cowardly and perpetually hungry. However, is cowardliness and perpetual hunger a bad thing? Does this at all discount the merit that Scooby-Doo brings to the table? No. If anything, this brings him even closer to the core of what we represent. Nothing in life is ever perfect. However, we can most certainly find perfection in all of life's many imperfections. In the same way, the Mystery Inc. Incorporated series rescued the Scooby Empire from the shadowy depths of the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo disaster. Our four-legged champion will join our agency and be the hero for our team that he has always been within the Mystery Incorporated gang, especially when the gang was in trouble. Scooby, for this reason and your ability to take the shape of a lamppost, flower pot, as well as a park bench, we choose you. One door may be closing with Mystery Inc. However, one door is beginning to open here with us in your new home. Take this kindly, Scooby, and please take it to heart. Focus on what it is that you really want to achieve. Success depends on your attitude, your way of thinking, taking affirmative action, and taking responsibility for the outcomes in your life. Have the desire and intention. Make the decision to take action, then do it. Take a leap of faith and trust that your inner guidance system will lead you in the right direction. Success is dependent on doing the right thing at the right time. It calls for you to concentrate on what truly matters. As we've seen, Scooby-Doo in countless episodes such as Jeepers, It Is a Creeper, and the Haunted House Hang-Up, the hard work and effort you put towards following your nose and living your life according to your personal truths will fully align you with your mission to be a people leader. With this, you will reap an abundance of Scooby snacks and plenty to maintain and sustain you as you continue along your path. Working persistently and passionately towards your highest goals and aspirations will see you achieving personal fulfillment and success on all levels. It is up to you to do the work needed to achieve our goal on perpetually raising the standard. Therefore, set your goals, make your plan, and persist in the direction of your desires. Have faith in yourself and your abilities to live up to your full potential. Scooby-Dooby-Doo!
Ladies and gentlemen, with that zoinks, that was Pablo Torres. So we're going with Scooby-Doo as the head of HR. You know, I'm liking that because if there's one thing that I know from Scooby-Doo is that he's always able to ferret out the real truth, even though that the real perpetrator, even though that perpetrator is disguised. So being able to probe the inner depths of that individual during the onboarding or hiring process will be able to unmask Mr. Carruthers as the, and I want to say it's always been Mr. Carruthers, to quote the Marvel, it's been Agatha all along. It's always Mr. Carruthers, who sets up that. Are we talking that he's going to set up that, he's going to bring to life that ghost story about the haunted mansion to keep people away so that he could collect on the insurance? Are we going to be able to figure? Is Scooby going to be able to ferret that out in the interview?
I hope so. With him joining our fictitious organization, he's definitely dipping into our fictitious budget, and we're certainly allocating a good chunk towards him and his Scooby snacks. So I really hope he brings it, and everything that he's bringing to the table is more than enough for us to be happy with as we continue to grow.
Yeah, I don't know what the market rate for Scooby snacks is. I hope they're not tied to Bitcoin. You like that? I tied that. Bring these two together, right? Cryptocurrency and Scooby snacks. They're completely unrelated. It says here in the show notes that tell us about the original creation of Scooby-Doo design and how it relates to his character overall.
Great
So,
question.
Yeah. That's some deep thinking. I want to say that that was one of our co-producers, Serena Gandy's idea. What do you got, Pablo? Probe that.
It was interesting. Digging through information on Scooby-Doo on the interwebs was quite fascinating. It was a really interesting learning experience that turned into quite amazing learning experience. And I say this because Scooby represents the complete opposite of what one would consider the proverbial version of perfection. And for me, learning this, the creator, Takamoto, he went ahead and spoke to world-renowned breeders and asked them what are the most desirable characteristics of a show class dog, a breed. And they described the Great Dane with all of the wanted attributes that make them show breed, show quality, pure blood, however you want to coin it. And he went and took all of that information and completely did the opposite and created an animal, a character who represented everything that was totally far and separated from perfection. And Scooby Scooby is one of the quirkiest and one of the most lovable characters that we have seen within the era of cartoons that my generation has grown up with, and certainly other generations before mine. And to know that this very charismatic and very, very personable individual represents everything but perfection, to me gives inner me, the younger me, hope that the world isn't as difficult as it needs to be. You don't always have to be perfect, but you can always try your best. And I think trying your best is the least that we can do. And Scooby definitely represents that.
And I think that's good. I mean, I think Scooby would be a good initial screen for our organization. And I think if we take a page out of Philip's discussion about not being afraid to fail and break things, we want that. We want that kind of we want that culture of be yourself and be cool and and you don't have to be perfect to work here, but just keep trying. I dig that. I like that. And I was thinking a little bit more. Maybe that it'll be good because instead of Bitcoin for our Scooby snacks, we're going to use what is that? The new one that's coming out with a dog on it, Dogecoin. Dogecoin, yeah. So we're going to use that. We're going to pay him in that, which is good because I think that's still down low on the. We can still get him for cheap for that one. So that's good. So, well, everyone, that's we had a really great show today. That brings us to the end of our program. So, I'd really like to thank you for joining us. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my co-hosts, Jack Clabby and Pablo Torres, and also our guest, Phillip Tarrant. And I got to tell you, this week's show was really exciting. I had a good time and learned a lot, especially that, the turkey could be the sponsor and mascot animal for all of cybersecurity, if not for the United States of America. And so that said, remember, rate, review, and subscribe to No Password Required Podcast, and send your questions and comments to info@nopasswordpodcast.com. I'm Ernie Ferreso. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the No Password Required Podcast. The show is produced by Cyber Florida. A special thanks goes out to our friends at Carlton Fields and Cognizant. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, visit our website, cyberflorida.org/pod.